Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to Bruce's Bees. We have a couple of special guests on here tonight. We have the bush bee man, Mark, and his son, John. How do you say that last name?
DeCaux. It's a
DeCaux.
French, yeah. It's a bit of
Okay.
French heritage back in, I don't know, heck, a
Lo-
few generations back anyway now.
Long time ago. We have a lot of
Yep.
French influence over here, like in New Orleans, which is not too far from me here, a few hours away. So, but I'm super excited, man. This is my first time ever talking or doing an interview with somebody across the pond or a long ways, other side of the world, so to speak. And you guys literally are other side of the world, both, east to west and southern hemisphere. It's totally different down there. And so I look forward to talking to you guys about how things are the same and how things are different in Australia. Mark and
Yeah.
John, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? I know, Mark, you're the bush bee man, and John, you're kind of, I guess you're his son, and you're the cameraman, the videographer, the editor, the tech guy. So kind of introduce yourself to us. Maybe Mark, start with you and just let us know how things are set up and tell us a little bit about your history with beekeeping and how this YouTube thing came to be for you guys.
No worries. Well, thanks for having us on, Bruce. It's really cool that you invited us along. I guess my beekeeping journey started because I'm actually got a small almond orchard as well, and we use bees for pollination. And of course, every now and then a swarm would escape the hive during the pollination, and so I collected a few of them and just got fascinated with beekeeping. And next thing you know, I've got several hives. And as I don't know, anybody who's been beekeeping knows that you get one hive, you get five, and then next thing you know, you got 50 or 500, or you really get to a point where you've just got to decide how many do I need or want or can handle, because they
That's
are
right.
beautiful little ladies. And it just, every time I lift the lid, I can't believe it. I get more in love. So I don't know what to think.
Mm, absolutely. Similar story here. John, how about you? How have you been involved with this journey?
So yeah, Dad's always been super supportive in my career of filmmaking, and part of it was I was at a transition point to turning my current business, like taking the business that I've got to the next level and moving away from doing TV news, which I was doing at the time. And Dad lives in the Riverland, which is about 3 hours from where I am at the moment. So he was staying, and he was like, "Oh, I want to show you something," and then brought up YouTube on like Apple TV, and he was like, "Just watch this." And it was, I can't remember whose it was, but they were a really, really informative video, but it just was a bit dry. And Dad was like, "I think we could do better." And I'll be honest, I was begrudgingly like, yeah, here another, like as you would see on the show, constant new ideas comes from Dad. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, fair enough. Fine, I'll indulge you. And so we went out and we shot that first palette video, and I knew when we were filming it that it was something worth making. And then but we we're kind of still a little bit hesitant. And then we showed Mum and my wife, and they like couldn't stop laughing. So we're kind of like, okay, I think we're onto something here. And then it just went from there, and it just, we're like, well, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it properly. And we banked a bunch of episodes, and we just like shot it, run it like it's been a production since, and we've been shooting in advance and making sure. And yeah, and it's really been capturing Dad's journey through beekeeping, and it's been exciting following it. And I was kind of like, oh, maybe we'll get a year out of this because there's nothing, like we'll run out of stuff to cover. But the amazing
Mm,
thing about bees is there's always something new to learn about them, and I think that was like the real inspiring part about this, is like there's always something new. And we kind of documented Dad's journey into kind of starting from scratch all the way. And then last year we kind of hit a turning point. We needed something, we were kind of like, Dad's journey's kind of got to that point where he's kind of retreading ground. It's becoming seasonal. And so we're kind of like, what do we do next? And something that we've been working on the last couple, like over the last month or so, like the last 6 months, has been doing new episodes that are focused on like broadening the content, which is what the last couple of weeks episodes have been. And it's really exciting to try something new.
I saw your introduction video, I guess, Mark, where you're trying some new things, and I think that's pretty exciting too. I guess you're going to travel a little bit, aren't you, and do some interviews or see what other people are doing or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Do some interviews and sort of look into a little bit about like I guess the extent that bees affect everybody, and also the little less known parts of beekeeping. Like
Mm-hmm.
we were interviewing a guy that's doing some bee venom research, and then we're talking to people that are basically making comparisons across bee colonies as to how they interact with, I guess, other entities and colonies, and the way they, just all really cool stuff other than just the standard beekeeping, which we'll do as well. But I just thought it's fascinating because we've had a lot of people reach out to us, and they're, I know, up in the middle of, where were they? In
Queensland.
Queensland, and they're at a festival of beekeepers that, well, basically nature lovers, but they use bees in a natural way with their venom and their oxygen from the hive and all sorts of, I don't know, stuff that we wouldn't really do as beekeepers professionally. But it's just amazing how they can basically traverse, I guess, all sorts of cultures and thinking and wherever you are in your whole journey of life, in a way.
One of my mottos, or one of the things that I say fairly often, is what an adventure it is every time you get into the bees. And you mentioned earlier how even still you crack open those hives and you look in there, and it's like you're rediscovering something all over again. At least that's how it feels to me. You never know exactly what you're going to find. You never know exactly how they're going to act. You have an idea and you know how to address different situations. But today I was watching, I think it was a video you did not too long ago, catching swarms. You were in some kind of an orchard. I don't know if it was a orange orchard or what it was. And man, there were swarms everywhere, and you're out there catching those things, and you got in your truck and drove away, and you said, "I'm done." And then you said, "No, I'm not."
Yeah.
It just kept escalating. And I was just like, you couldn't ride it. Like, we were turning it, like we were there just to get that swarm out of the citrus tree, and it just like, we're like, oh, it'll be a really quick, we'll shoot a really quick episode. It'll be like an hour and a half, maybe a couple of hours. And we're there all day chasing those swarms. It's just like every time we turned around, there was a new one.
Yeah. Now, were those close to some of your bees, or were they somebody else's bees? Where'd those swarms come from?
Well, there was some from ours. Most of them were my own, because what happened this year, or that year when we were filming that, the canola was really late because our season was really quite late. Normally, they go on the canola before the almonds, and then they go through the almond part of things, and it's early winter and it helps them build up, and which is all beautiful and fine. But that season, or last season, the canola was really late, and the girls were on that when they normally wouldn't be on that late in spring. By the time we got out of there and got to the citrus, they'd bred up and just, I don't know, they'd just gone off their chops. And so I've done some splits, but those ones that I thought were going to be fine obviously said, no, we're going as well.
Yeah, when they decide to do it, it's going to happen unless you stay on top of it. Even when you stay on top of it, sometimes they're in the trees. And so, well, that kind of is I think a good way to start, maybe more on the topic of the intentional beekeeping. Obviously, you're in the Southern Hemisphere, so the seasons are, I think, completely opposite of us, right? So when you say the winter, that's your prime time for bees, right? This fall and the winter is when they build up and they produce. Whereas here, the spring and the summer is when they build up and produce. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, well, we still are in the spring and summer, but it's basically the opposite time of year for you guys.
Yes.
So it's just different.
So why it's your winter, it's our summer. So
you call. I was going to ask that question. Do you call like right now? You call this fall?
Well, right now, it's coming into autumn. Yeah, autumn's fall.
Okay. I didn't realize that I didn't know how you did that. So. Okay, so Christmas for you is in the summertime for you guys, right?
Yes, we have it's summer every Christmas. It's kind of interesting because obviously in Australia we get a lot of American movies and TV shows and media and everything. And so it's the middle of summer and it's usually the hottest day of the year on Christmas Day.
I didn't realize that they called the seasons differently. I knew that it was opposite as far as the weather, but I didn't know you actually called it summer, winter.
We have summer, winter, and then we have autumn and spring. So which is equivalent to your fall and spring, isn't it?
It's just the opposite. That's pretty wild. Yeah. So right now, what are you doing? Are you getting ready for your winter? Is that kind of what you're working on right now?
Yep, we're wintering down at the minute. Yeah, just trying to make sure they've got enough stores and that they're fed up a bit, and then just basically taking off the last little bit of honey if they've got any of that they want to get off, but not too much. I don't take too much honey this time of year because I'd rather them actually keep that than feed them full of sugar syrup. But I mean, everybody, that's a whole nother excitement we could talk about. Everybody's got an opinion about that.
Sure. I'm sure you guys, I know there are people that are on YouTube and online with various beekeeping videos and articles and stuff. So I'm sure that you see stuff from the United States and from the Northern Hemisphere. from what you've seen, obviously the basics of beekeeping are the same everywhere pretty much. The bees, they have a queen, they have workers, they have drones, all that kind of stuff. The basics are kind of the same, the principles. But from what you've seen and from your experience, what do you think are some of the differences between beekeeping in Australia and maybe the people, you know, us over here in the States, so to speak?
Well, from where we are down here in South Australia, which is a fairly, I guess, arid landscape, we have a lot less ground foliage, which is due to the fact that our farmers have changed a lot of their farming practice. I don't know, in America, I guess it's the same sort of idea now. They're all basically spray fallowing, and so there's no weeds in the corner of any of the paddocks anymore. So we basically have to just monitor which gums, because quite often our gums don't have good pollen, even if they've got a good nectar flow. And so we used to get away with it when there was enough, you know, odd weeds around for them to get pollen from. But now that they're not there, we have to just make sure that we're not getting a honey flow, and then all of a sudden you get in the box and they've gone mad and got a nice honey crop, but they've run out of bees because they haven't been able to feed any young ones. So that can be an issue. And and heat. Rather than you guys have trouble in the winter with your cold, we have trouble when it's 40 degrees for a week. Girls get a bit worn out with that.
Yeah. So well, you know, I'm in the southern United States, where I'm at here in southeast Alabama. It gets really hot and muggy, really humid here, and it sounds like you're more in a desert type area. Is that correct? So
Pretty
it's
much.
a little bit different. You know, in the United States, I imagine Australia is similar. There are a lot of different regions and climates. If you're in southern Australia, it gets pretty cold in the wintertime there, right?
Yeah, well, we are. Yes, it can at the night anyway. It does get quite fresh in the evening. We'll have a frost. We never get any snow though. Well, not that I've seen.
Yeah.
But it does get -2 or 3, which I think is pretty cold. But
that's probably about like it is here. I'm trying to figure in my head the Celsius to Fahrenheit.
So in summer, 40 degrees is about 105 Fahrenheit.
Yeah. And I know that 0 Celsius is our freezing, so that's 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So I know what you're saying. You're in the upper 20s if you're -2. So that's very similar, it sounds like, to our temperatures here in Alabama, in southern Alabama. Occasionally we'll get down pretty cold, but usually what you mentioned is about as low as it gets here. And then we don't quite get to, you know, 40 degrees or 105 degrees Fahrenheit, but we get up to the mid 90s Fahrenheit, and it's very humid. So they call it the heat index. Feels like it's 105 or 110 or about the same as it is there. It can be very miserable. So the bees here, when that happens, you know, the way they work right here in my unique area, of course, in different parts of the country, I'm sure it's the same down there in Australia, is totally different. The flows are different. The blooms, the flowers, the foliage is different. But here we have right now, they're starting to build up. It's our spring. And so they're really building up. And then our honey flow is actually quite short. It's only a couple of months and there's basically nothing. And so we and then right about the time that the honey flow kind of cuts off, we hit those really hot and humid temperatures. And so it's a miserable experience here trying to do beekeeping in the summertime. It's just, the bees aren't happy, the beekeepers aren't happy, and nobody's happy. And so it can be, you know, we have 2 or 3 months of real fun beekeeping, and then it kind of the rest of the year you're kind of just trying to manage and keep them moving along.
With the humidity, do you find that moisture build up inside the hive is an issue?
It's not too bad in the summertime. They do a lot of fanning. You see them fanning and doing the washboarding activity a lot. I'm not sure why they do that on the outside of the hives. If you guys have an idea, where they kind of move up and down rhythmically, but they do a lot of fanning and bearding in the summertime when it's really humid. In the wintertime is when we have more issues with the moisture buildup, because it's cold outside and warm inside. The condensation can become a problem dripping on the bees, but we don't have a lot of problems. As long as the hives are well ventilated, it's not too much of an issue. The bees manage it pretty well here.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
Amazing little critters, aren't they? How they can regulate the temperature, and it fascinates me.
It does, and I can tell it fascinates you watching your videos.
Yeah.
I also watched the video today where you attach the bin or the container on the top of a pole or on top of something and went up and did that.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. I've caught a lot of swarms. I use a 5-gallon bucket. I'm not sure what size that is in liters. I don't know how that works, but I attach it to an extendable paint pole, and you can bump it up like 20 feet up in the air and just stand on the ground and just bump them, and that works pretty well. But
That might have been wiser, Dad. Sorry, something with that episode with the bucket on the stick. Something that I wasn't able to capture properly was how, because I had to film but also hold onto the ladder, of how like that video comes across as absurd, but like the reality of it was I was holding the camera while holding the ladder while Dad was on the very top of it, not on like on top of the actual ladder.
He stepped up there. He's like, should I go up one more rung? I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah. And then, yeah, it was hairy. And then at one point, the ladder, I had to stop filming, which is not in the actual episode. But at one point, the ladder started shaking back and forth because this is a few years back. But it started shaking back and forth. So I had to drop the camera on the ground and hang on to it. And Dad, nearly fell off onto this like wooden structure, which would have just like wouldn't have held his weight, and he would have gone straight through it.
Man, I'm glad you didn't fall off and hurt yourself. I'm glad you're still with us, Mark.
That's exactly
awesome.
Right. Not much. I should have get some danger money, I reckon.
I don't know if we could afford the insurance if they watch the videos.
So
maybe we'll
get
the insurance before they watch us.
So here's a question for you guys. Is this your full-time gig? Do you do bees and YouTube full-time, or do you have other things that you do on the side?
Well, I've still got a few almonds, so I do a little bit of that as well. And obviously, bees and the YouTube, which is also tangled up with our marketing of products and, obviously selling honey and selling other bee products that we make on our website, which I was actually doing before I trying to package some stuff up to go around the planet. So that's rather interesting.
Yeah, I received my first order today of a 5-gallon bucket of honey to ship somewhere, and I've never done that before. So my wife and I, we got it ready to go and send it. I hope it makes it okay. That's a big, 60 pounds.
That's awesome.
That's
60 pounds of honey. That's a lot of honey to send through the mail, and we sent it through. Over here they have what they call UPS, United Parcel Service. There's 3 or 4 different companies that deliver.
Yep.
And so I think it was the most affordable shipping, and so that's what we did. But we'll see. I told the guy, he emailed me, and I emailed him back and said, just let me know, make sure it gets there safe. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Do you ship all over?
Yeah, we do. We ship all over the world, actually.
Oh, really?
Except for mainly America, Europe. Not so much. I've had sent some stuff to Saudi Arabia, which isn't too bad, but then some of the stuff in India is a bit hectic because I'm not sure what happens to their postal service, because it gets to the edge of the nation and then I don't know where it ends up. So we've sort of like a lot of our Indian customers don't order too much anymore because it's too hard to do.
Yeah, I imagine so. I think I've never tried to ship anything overseas. On my Shopify account, I pretty much continental United States only, but I'm just getting started. All I'm selling right now basically is honey and beeswax when I have some of them out right now. But so kind of diving into the topic here I'd like to talk a little bit about intentional beekeeping, that term. Do you have any thoughts on that? What do you think? What would that mean to you, that term intentional beekeeping? And what are some of the things you do to make sure you're intentional in your approach to have success?
Well, I guess I start with the queen for a start, make sure that she's young and fresh and able to keep up the production. Although having said that, I have had some 2-year-old queens that have done quite nicely, and I haven't requeened. And whether that was a good or bad decision is another question. And I guess mainly it's about managing where they're foraging as to how much, food you're bringing in and how much nectar and how much pollen and where they are. As far as, if they're breeding up too much, a bit like with that swarm episode that we were talking about. Like I should have perhaps done a few more splits when that was going on. They're a lot easier to split them than it is to catch them out of a tree. But it just, I guess intentional beekeeping is really, we all think we're managing them, but honestly, in the end, I've decided they're managing me and I'm just trying to keep up. That's where I'm at.
That's true. That is very true. It's more just kind of trying to figure out what their plans are and what they're doing, and then trying to manage that space, so to speak, depending on what you want to accomplish. If you want to accomplish honey, you've got to do it a certain way. Mm-hmm. If you want to, make bees, you got to do that a certain way. If you just want to pollinate, everything's a little bit different. And so one thing I didn't hear in your comments was mites. You guys don't have varroa mites there, do you?
Oh, mate, we've got them in New South Wales at the minute. There's a big effort to try and contain them, but every time I go on their website, there's another few red dots that have gone a bit further afield. So technically we have got mites, but they're not endemic at this point. So they're still basically destroying hives and doing for New South Wales neighbours. I don't know. It's messy up there.
Kind of explain the geography. You mentioned you're in Southern Australia. I'm not real familiar with the geography in Australia. When you say Southern, are you Southern Central Australia? Or are you kind of on the west or the east, or where are you located? And where's New South Wales at? Kind of where is everything in relation to you?
There you go, John.
Do you want me to do it? All right. So we're in central, like Southern Australia, so South Australia, and then to the west is Western Australia, which is 1/3 of the whole country, and then above us is Northern Territory, and then the east coast essentially is made up of Queensland in the northeast, then New South Wales in the central east, and then Victoria in the southern east, and then of course there's Tasmania, which is an island off the country itself.
Okay. See, I was
totally left off of maps.
in my mind, I had the cities kind of reversed. I thought that was over on the west side. So I just kind of got to get my brain kind of wrapped.
So we've got a population of about 27 million people. It's a big country, and it's about the same size as Northern America. But yeah, we're a lot more sparsely populated than the rest of like most of the built up world.
Yeah, it's one thing I love is the accent. I love everything about it. I want to come to Australia someday. That's kind of always been something I wanted to do, but never made it there yet. So who knows?
You'll find a bed at our place if you want to come.
Oh, it would be fun to come hang with you for sure. We'd have a blast, I think. So yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Cayman Reynolds and some of the folks over here in the States. Cayman he started a conference up called the Hive Life Conference, if you've heard of that. And we've had a lot of big, kind of stars come in, people like Ian Stepler, the Canadian beekeeper, and some people, Richard Noel has come in, and just quite a few people from all over the world. But Cayman kind of has a philosophy I kind of call the Hive Life movement or principles of great queens, dead mites, and proper nutrition. Since you don't have to deal with the mites so much, at least not yet, you hit on both of those, the great queens and the proper nutrition. Yep. And so that's kind of the basics of beekeeping. You can really kind of, stimulate the bees to do things or to back off or whatever, depending on what you feed them and the type of environment you put them in. But they still, there's so many. One thing that's so fascinating is just how each colony is different. I guess because of genetics, because of everything that goes into that. So
don't you love it when you're in the yard and you're going along and then you do start working on a colony that decides to be very upset, and then all the neighbors get upset, and then it's like, hang on, I might go down the other end and let them all just settle down.
Man, it's crazy. Sometimes, you learn which colony is that way, and you work them last. So when you're done, you can leave. You just kind of, and I don't know, sometimes depending on weather and depending on circumstance, different ones are a little more cranky at times. But that is one thing I've been working on pretty hard with genetics, is trying to calm my bees down a little bit, because they have a reputation that's not good necessarily. At least on YouTube, people tell me how crazy my bees are. And so they're getting better, though. I've been bringing in some outside genetics and trying to improve that. Do you do a lot of intentional queen rearing and make your own queens, or how do you do that?
A bit of both. I was a bit like you. First of all, I did import some bloodlines because my girls were, I guess, a little bit wayward. So I thought I'd bring in some new queens, and then I let them sort of. I didn't requeen the whole lot, though. I let them kind of mix and match a little bit, and then I raised out of the ones that I thought were performing better and were easier to work, but a little hardy. It's a weird thing down here, because if you can make them too beautiful and soft and relaxed, they kind of just don't do as well, because I think they need a little bit of attitude to survive down here in our environment for some reason. So that a bit of anger is good for them.
I tend to agree. My mentor, when I first started keeping bees, he's like, Bruce, it's okay if your bees are a little bit defensive. They need to be a little bit spicy that way, but they also, in my opinion, need to be workable. So, there is that fine line where, because there are skunks and different varmints and animals that get in them, and different pests, and you want to have and even other bees that have a greater tendency to robbing and things like that. They need to be willing to defend themselves and not just allow stuff to come in and take them over.
Yeah.
but it can be out of control sometimes. And so I'm trying to kind of get that balance. And I think our local feral mutts, we call them here in Alabama, the local stock is pretty rugged and it's a little bit spicy. And so I'm trying to kind of just figure out how to tone that down. And, you know, I don't know if there's anything such thing as a perfect bee, but I think we're all trying to get to whatever is going to work best for us in our situation. So that's pretty awesome. Do you have mostly an Italian influence, or do you really know what your genetics are?
Yeah, mainly Italians. That's probably where that comes down. We have a few colonies. I can't even pronounce them properly.
Carniolans,
yeah, but they're fairly much in the background. They seem to end up that way, dark little angry little
Oh, really?
sods when they get out in the wild. But the Italians seem to be where we are, like them. And then there's we can get some up from down Kangaroo Island way. Well, we used to be able to before the fires and all the mess that those poor blokes got into. Like, hopefully in another couple of years, the forage will come back and they can start exporting queens again. They're probably my favorite ones. I think they look pretty too, which is no way to judge whether it's any good or not.
Have you ever experienced in a colony where you have bees that are all different colors, like you have a yellow bee and almost black bee in the same colony?
Not so much the worker bees, but obviously the drones, because they all interact with each other anyway.
Sure.
Like, they seem to be wherever, but no, not really. I mean, probably slightly different shades, as in, because it depends who she's mated with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had some, you know, they're typically pretty consistent, but I've had a few colonies where you had some that were pretty light and some that were pretty dark. I think it's just the drones they mated with is a big part of that, like you said. So,
yeah.
Well, good stuff, man. Well, I'm trying to think. I know. So I wanted to ask you how many colonies you had, kind of where you at. I've heard you mention it in your videos some, but I don't know how recent those videos were. So kind of where you at with your.
Well, at the minute I've sort of plateaued at around about 300, which is about 3 truckloads. So I'm sort of sitting around there because it sort of suits my needs in amongst everything that's going on. And I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of watching this varroa mite excitement unfold and trying to work out like the workload where we are. Because I think the biggest drama we're going to have down here is we don't really have a seasonal brood break. So I don't know the whole control mechanism that seems what I can research. I mean, you'd know more about this than me, but what I can research is that if you have a brood break, and then at least when you do that folic acid, you kill the mites that are on the bees outside of like the brood nest. But I mean, how do you kill the little suckers when they're inside the jolly wax cappings and all the rest of it?
Well, that's something I'm trying to figure out, and I'll tell you what I've started doing the last couple of years. You know, one of Cayman Reynolds, and of course it just applies everywhere in the world except I guess Australia. Now that's even happening there. Is the dead mites part of that equation?
Yeah.
And there are all kinds of products out there. The oxalic acid, where you can use the vapor in there. I'm not sure. You know, obviously, whenever it gets legalized and stuff in Australia, that you guys are, it's going to take a little time, I'm sure, because you're kind of behind the wave a little bit. It's going to be a little difficult to get everything justified. But I know there's a product I'm just starting to use here. It's called Formic Pro, and it's basically a formic acid product. And what it does is you can use it with honey supers on, but it goes in and it does penetrate the cappings. And so it will kill the mites, but it is very temperature sensitive. I'm not sure what the Fahrenheit temperature or the Celsius temperature would be, but it's 85 degrees Fahrenheit is the max temp it needs to be. And so right now I've got some bees coming back from pollination that have been in California, and my goal, I've never used it before in a great scale, but I'm planning on, the temperatures are going to be in around the 80 range. So it's about a few degrees lower than what we need when they come back. And I'm going to just put that in
late
there.
20s for us.
Yeah, I'm just going to put that in there. Yeah, I need to do better. I kind of know, but I don't know exactly.
No. I'm just about late 20s for us.
So is it like a tablet form?
No, it's like a strip. It's like it's a really strong space. It's kind of, honestly, it's a little harsh on the bees, but what it does, the reason I bring this up is because you mentioned the brood breaks. It does shut the queen down for a few days. And so, you know, you'll have some open brood time there where if you pull it off and if you test and if you still have a mite issue or whatever, you can hit them with oxalic acid at that point in time. And it also just creates a natural brood break. And I've only used it on a couple of colonies so far, but I'm about to use it on about 50 or 55 colonies here soon. But it does penetrate the cappings. And the good thing about it too is I'm pretty sure you can use it with honey supers on. So if you run into a problem during honey time, you can stick it on there then as well. People say it kills the queen, and very rare, I think, for that to actually happen. It more just shuts her down. I think an old, feeble queen, or a queen that's about on her way out anyway, it may have some issues with it. But young, vibrant queens or healthy queens, what I've seen in the colonies I've used it on is there's a breed break there for just a few days, and that queen goes back to laying, and it is just a beautiful pattern. But that's a product I'm just starting to learn. And the rep from Formic Pro was down here for a conference in Alabama a few weeks back, and came and actually worked bees with me. He's actually in Canada. He's the North American rep and the rep for New Zealand. He goes to both places, so he could probably give you some pretty good guidance, and I can send you the contact information. He's really quick. You could just message him on Messenger. Probably he would get back to you pretty quick.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
I did a video. We did an interview with him that evening. He was here. And then I've got a couple of videos up I did recently where I applied the Formic Pro, and then I made a mistake doing it. And the other one is the follow-up. And so I think maybe you find that interesting if you get a chance to watch them. They're not long videos, but they're pretty good ones. So, but yeah, you got a wave coming. Hopefully you can get, figured out and kind of get a game plan before they arrive to be able to keep it a minimal loss. The bees over here, it's hard on them, but it's been around a while. So you guys, I know it makes you real nervous. It's got to be just kind of.
Yeah. Because I've read some reports and it talks about like perhaps half your colonies get wiped out or something along the way. Like even if because it's just a new thing for them, and they obviously, as you say, because they're getting their fat cells sucked by these little brutes, then they get weak. And I guess some of that might be from us too. It's a bit like the first time you find foul brood. Like after you found it the first time, you go, oh yeah, now I know what it is, and you kind of, it's easy to see in a way. But the first time round, you kind of, is it not? What is it? Oh, what have I got? It's a bit like everything else with this game. Once you've done it a few times and seen it, you kind of know what you're looking at.
Speaking of diseases, what are the primary pests or problems that you have there for your bees?
I would say down south here, it is probably foul brood, the both of them, the European one and the American one. And then down the list from there is wax moths, but they're not really a problem other than the fact that if you don't catch a hive that's getting sick and sort of shrink them down a bit or mix them up with some other girls that are strong, then, the wax moth will just wipe them out. But they're not a problem if your colonies are strong and healthy, and we don't really have a problem with the hive beetles. They're really bad up in New South Wales where it's a bit cooler and a bit damper. Down here, I think it's too dry for them to breed. So we're probably fairly lucky in the grand scheme of diseases at this point. But
how isolated are you from these other parts of the country? Are there bees the whole stretch between, or is there kind of like a barrier around you where there aren't any bees really? Are you pretty isolated, or are you kind of mixed in with everybody else?
We're reasonably isolated. I mean, the South Australian beekeeping areas are not massive, but the biggest problem we've got is that we've got something similar to you with the Californian pollination situation. And at the moment, the almond growers are all fighting with each other about whether the New South Wales bees can come to the almonds. And then there's this idea that, oh, well, if they've checked them and they have got their little piece of paper that says they're not infected, then off we go. And so we're all going to, anyway.
Well, yeah, that's they're gonna, if they're bringing bees in from a mite infested area, they're going to be there. I mean, it's just, there's just no doubt about it in my mind anyway. It's just impossible, I think, to really, you can't test every bee, and you may have a hive that's very low mite load, but they've got them. You may have a colony that's actually, fairly resistant to the mites that they can coexist, but they may check out okay. And then they get out and they're foraging with other bees, and somehow they swap, the bees, there's some drift or something, and that bee ends up in a mite free colony, and off you go. Those little mites are super good at reproduction. So yeah, that's you guys are really facing a difficult challenge right now. And I'm sure, I know over there, you guys are known for your toughness and your ability to adapt. And so I'm sure you're going to figure it out, but I know it's got to be really a little bit nerve wracking for you.
But I know the hardest part's going to be the initial wave of it, because I think that's like Dad was alluding to with the losses early on, because I think the longer the bees go, the varroa mite, the more they adapt. It's a little bit like any disease, even with humans. The longer they're having to live with it, the better they get with it. But that initial wave is going to really hurt. And I think that's something that probably we know it, but don't want to face the reality of it just yet.
That's true. And I totally agree. That's what happened here, I think. And And but the bees here, we lose quite a few, I think, over here in the States because of the varroa mite. But there are folks here in this country that are developing genetic traits, bees that are more and more varroa mite resistant, and just trying to kind of develop that genetic line. And maybe if there's a way to get some of those queens and stuff into Australia, maybe that could help nip that situation in the bud a little bit. If you could get some, they call them VSH, which means varroa sensitive hygiene, which means that the bees, they can sense where the varroa mites are under the cappings because they reproduce in the larvae of the bees and the drone brood. They prefer the drone brood, but they also can do it in the worker brood. And so the bees that are varroa sensitive, they somehow sense the varroa mites in the pupa, and they actually pull them out. They like uncap them and they pull them out. They create problems to where they actually go and they fight them. And so the issue is if you get what they call hygienic bees that are just super hygienic, they just start pulling everything out. There's something wrong with it. And so then, it's kind of that catch-22. But the varroa sensitive hygiene, there's a lot of research here in the United States on that right now. And the idea is to develop a bee that's varroa sensitive, also has the good genetic traits, but also, produces honey and is a good producer. And that's kind of a challenge. There's a guy named Corey Stevens here who is he's become somewhat of a friend of mine, and he's a young guy, kind of like you, John. He's a young guy, and he's out there head kind of leading some of that research, and he's developing a pretty rugged, strong line of bees. And so I don't know if there's going to be a way in the future to kind of help get some of the genetics passed over to you guys to help kind of nip that in the bud. But I'm sure whether or not that happens, there'll be folks down there that develop some similar type stuff. But it'd be nice to get a little bit of that in your country, quickly, instead of having to go through the entire learning curve that we've had to do over here.
One would hope. I mean, that's what I'm hopeful that, being the last land mass to actually encounter these lovely little creatures, hopefully we could learn something from the people that have gone before us. And, actually, at least you've got some products. I should imagine when it first hit the USA, there wasn't any stuff you were like, what the hell is this? And what are we doing? And so hopefully our losses won't be quite as, I don't know, catastrophic, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure there are people in your organization, in your business down there that are reaching out and trying to figure out what the best thing to do is. I'm sure that's happening now, and hopefully it won't be too bad for you guys.
No, but we'll find out soon enough.
Well, Mark, let me ask you, what is your favorite thing about beekeeping? What do you like to do the most with the bees? What is your favorite, I guess, your go-to or your sweet spot with the bees?
I reckon my favorite thing is doing the spring brood inspection when I got a nice laying pattern and you pick out the third from the outside, or even if they're laying on the outside frame and they've got the whole brood box full of a beautiful brood that's about to hatch. That's probably my favorite thing, watching the queen and watching her laying pattern and looking at, the nice white young larvae and how she's going, whether she's got it in a nice orderly circle and they're hatching out beautiful. I would say that's probably my favorite thing. And my second favorite thing was just when you lift the lid off the top super, and you see all the girls fanning and you can smell that nectar just about ripe. And you think, oh, I don't know. I used to be much more excited about the honey crop and go, oh, look at that. We're actually going to get some honey. That's cool. Now I look at it and go, man, there's another job.
That looks like a lot of work. That's what I say, a lot of work. But my primary source of income so far has been the honey over the years. Last year we had a record crop. We had, I think, about 7,400 pounds, which for me is really good. It's not the funnest anymore because it's a lot of work and it's right in that hot, humid time of the year. And so it's really quite miserable to harvest that. Yeah. But when it's hot like that, though, it does flow easily. It's not, it's not slow to flow. It's easy to get out of the comb, so to speak, and spin out. But
it is funny though, isn't it? The first, I don't know. I remember still being all excited about my first couple 100-liter drum full of honey, thinking, man, that's incredible. Look at that. And then now it's like, golly gosh, where am I going to let all this stuff settle before it can jar it up?
I know. It becomes a problem. With 300 colonies, you end up with quite a honey crop every year, I imagine, don't you?
Well, most years, it just depends. I mean, we had, like, this year's been quite good, but the 2 years previous to this has been really quite a drought here. So we did get a couple of flows, but the gums, which were our main nectar source, just struggled really badly. And the citrus this year was very ordinary because the weather was terrible. So the girls would go out for a week and they'd get some nice citrus honey, and I'd think, here we go, they're going to get organized, and then it'd be horrible, cold and miserable for 2 weeks, and they'd eat it all again.
Oh man. Do you move your colonies to the citrus, and do you move them around, or do you leave them kind of in one spot?
Yeah, no, we move around a fair bit. Yeah, I'm probably not as moving around as much as a lot of other beekeepers because heck, I've got so much else going on, but I try to move them around enough.
Are there a lot of new beekeepers in that area that do you sell like nukes and do you sell bees to new beekeepers or other beekeepers around, or do you pretty much keep all your stuff on hand for your own business?
At this stage, I'm pretty much doing my own thing. I do sell a few live colonies, a few nukes and stuff, but I haven't done it on a commercial basis by any stretch of the imagination. I was really looking into that, going that way fairly well. I guess that was my next thing to do, really. But then this whole varroa thing, and I got all nervous, and now I don't know where I am. So I'm just sitting here cooling my heels for a year to see what happens.
That's probably wise to go ahead and just kind of regroup and just kind of stay at your sweet spot at what you feel comfortable doing and just see what happens. So you mentioned you had about 300 colonies. I think we talked earlier about your history with bees, but how long have you been keeping them?
Well, it depends on how you look at beekeeping. I've had bees for quite a long time. Back when when I grew up south of Adelaide, we had some colonies on the almond orchard there. And a similar thing, they would get left behind because the beekeepers move on. And then we were just playing around with them. And then when I moved to the Riverland, similar sort of thing, except I got a bit more serious. I had probably had 5-10 hives for quite a while and didn't really get too carried away because it wasn't my main focus. And then as the almond industry in Australia just blew up, it went, I don't know, absolutely next level crazy. And so I started thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get enough bees to pollinate these little orchard of mine, because I'm not going to be able to compete against the big corporates that have come to town. So I thought maybe I'll get a bit more serious. And then I got so jolly serious, I'm sort of a part-time almond grower instead of a part-time beekeeper. So it's kind of odd how it works.
That was about 6 years ago. So.
Yeah,
about 6 years ago. So you've been around bees your whole life. It sounds like, or a great part of your life. It sounds like then.
I think the biggest change I've seen with Dad over that period of time is previously, before really getting into it as an almond grower, it was bees were just a means to an end to a certain degree, and the flowers and everything else kind of like they're there and it can be a hindrance. But like the real attitude change and the kind of viewpoint change has been amazing to watch with Dad, and seeing his change of viewpoint on the how you may continue to maintain some weeds and flowers and stuff like that for the bees, and just that environmental approach and change from the real horticultural farmer mindset to a holistic kind of view on it. And it's been really nice to watch.
I can't tell you how much just your whole attitude just is contagious, honestly, Mark. I mean, I feel the same way in my bees, but I'm just not as energetic as you are. So I really want to applaud you at that just the positive energy that you have. And I mean, who wouldn't want to keep bees after watching a couple of your videos, man? I mean, it's all, and what you're doing is you're putting into, and John, you play a major role in this too. You're bringing to life for people the adventure that it is. So many people just show like a little section of what you've done that day. Like you may show like an inspection on a hive, or you may do this or that, but you kind of go through the whole adventure that you're on, and you kind of, Mark, you do a great job of bringing clips in at different angles and showing everything. And so
you go.
That was what we were trying. I think the interesting thing is we've done such a good job. Every now and then we get letters from husbands or wives, depending on which way it goes, saying, "My goodness me, they've got all excited, and I've watched your video, and we've got 3 hives, and now we've got 30, and I'm not sure."
Yeah,
sort of exactly. They're really cool. They're always usually enjoying themselves, but it's
like how'd that happen?
I guess for me, when we first started, and that conversation we had on the couch watching beekeeping videos, something I felt as somebody that didn't actually know anything about beekeeping at that point was that a lot of it came across as and you get 30 beekeepers in a room, you get 10 beekeepers in a room, you're going to get 30 opinions. But a lot of those other videos were a lot more, hey, this is there's only one way to do it. And it made the pressure on the people watching it that there was like this high stakes that you can't screw it up, like you can't get it wrong. And something that I was really keen with Dad to do was create a series of videos that gave people the opportunity to know that it's okay to make mistakes, and that actually because my philosophy in life is like your biggest learning lessons are your mistakes. Like if you don't make mistakes, how are you ever going to learn? And I think that was something that I was really happy and really proud of the series in general, is that encapsulating that Dad just giving it a go and learning as he goes along. And I think early on there was a real pushback. We had like the first 6 to 12 months, we had a lot of like negativity from the general beekeeping community, because it was not something that was kind of put out there. Was the there was a black and white kind of answer to everything. And so that's been really something I think that we've been able to bring to the table, is making it more inclusive and accessible to people that just wanted to give it a go. Because look, the reality is, and Dad always has said it in the videos, is like, go and get at least 2 hives, or like you're probably going to accidentally, and probably not even your own fault, you're going to kill that first hive, and you're going to have to get another one until you figure it out how you're going to help the bees and make sure it works. And I think that was something that, needed to be injected into the kind of beekeeping community, was just give it a go.
I think the other thing that the more experienced beekeepers miss the memo that we were trying to build a journey. Like we wanted the start of it to be interesting, and this is where you start. You don't start beekeeping knowing, well, heck, I still don't know everything, and I'm pretty sure anybody who's honest would know that they know about 60 to 70% of what the bees are doing, and the rest of it's up to them. But but really, we were trying to tell a story, like make a narrative, this is the journey, like not sort of come and say, this is how you have to do it. It was more about, this is what we're doing, and come along for the ride.
We've got a guy over here. His name is Mike Berry. He says, this is not a how-to video, it's a how I do video. In my opinion, when people say this is how you have to do it, then I'm going to run the other way, because there's, to me, you're closed-minded and you're not willing to learn, and if you act that way. And so I'm okay with folks doing how-to videos, how to get started, how to do this or how to do that. But I have a very similar attitude, Mark, as what you have, as far as, look, I make mistakes, and I like people to see that. I want them to see what I did wrong. So maybe, just maybe, they can avoid that same mistake. I was watching the video just before I got on here. I think it just dropped in just a few hours ago, of the tower. What was it? The Beehive Interest Tower thing. And I'm like, I love the attitude. Like, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. I mean, and that's kind of what you do. You do that a lot in your videos, and that's what's fun, because that gives people the freedom. Like even catching a swarm, maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not. Whatever you try, when you try something new, if you say that, then that gives another beekeeper the freedom to try it too, because then they know that, hey, it's okay if I make a mistake. It's going to be okay. I don't have to be paralyzed into doing it one certain way. And so many people, you probably get this too. I get questions of people that are so worried about, if I do this, can I do this? Can I do that? And I'm like, look, really in principle, it ought to work, but you got to try it and see, try it for yourself.
When people contact me with an idea that I think's a bit, I usually go, maybe just do that with one hive and see how you get on. Like if you want to give it a go, let's not do the whole yard.
Well, and that's true. And who knows, maybe they're on something that might just work. But just try it with one. But I love that attitude, man. And the thing about beekeeping is there are just so many different directions you can go.
Absolutely right.
Everybody has to figure out and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. You know what I mean? I still don't know. You mentioned how your journey has changed as you go along, and I think that's what happens to all of us. You start to get the bees, and you marvel at them, or at least I do, and it's just I'm amazed every time I mess with them and at what they can do. So next thing I know, sometimes I'm going in a completely opposite direction of what I thought I was going to do. And
the cool thing about beekeeping is you can try, like, it keeps it interesting. There's always different options. Man. There's always different ways. And so it's not like it's not like it's not repetitive.
Sorry, do you have any excitement with the queen on the wing when she's out, on her mating flight? Do you have any, birds and stuff that, like, we had a bit of a dragonfly excitement this year. Like, that was not fun because we had a bit of a flood, and so the dragonflies bred up like crazy, and they weren't. Yeah, so I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't as good as it should have been. Like the actual.
Yeah, I actually just barely, I'm working on a video right now where I went in and followed up on some early spring splits, and the percentages were not very good. And I don't know what the cause was. We've had a lot of crazy weather. I don't think we've had a lot of, maybe birds, but I don't think we've had a lot of insect intervention at this point in time yet. It hasn't been hot enough, but we do have dragonflies. We have all that kind of crazy stuff around. And most of my bees are actually near a water source, like near a pond or a swampy area. So you have all the predators, all the dragonflies and stuff around. But I usually have a pretty good queen acceptance rate or a pretty good success rate on the mating flights. But this year, I don't know why, but I didn't have the results I'd hoped. But I split really, really early. We had some cells available from a beekeeper, a commercial beekeeper, and so we bought those and I split them. And I just was probably a couple of weeks early splitting them, honestly, and didn't have. Now the queens that got mated are beautiful and they're doing a good job, but a lot of them just didn't work out, and so that happens. But hey, I look at it, if I do 35 splits, if I end up with even half of that, say I end up with 18 colonies, 17, 18 new colonies, that's more than I would have had. And once again, I'm keeping them out of the trees. Hopefully they're not going to build up and swarm on me, because I'm not able to get out there to them as often as I probably should. I do work full time at a local hospital, and so it may be 2 or 3 weeks before I get back to the bee yard sometimes. And so who knows which ones have swarmed off, and they're in a hollow of a tree or in somebody's wall somewhere. Who knows?
Do you get that? When back in the early days when we were fozzicking around trying to get started, get expanded a bit, I used to sort of get all enthused about catching swarms. I still do, but the swarm part of things. But when you actually say to people, give me a call if you got a swarm, on a bit of the social media thing, and then you get people ringing up saying, I've got a swarm over here in the back shed, and I'm going, okay, what do you mean they're in your shed? Oh, well, they're a bit flying in and out behind the iron, and I'm going, I don't know whether that's a swarm anymore.
People say there's a lack of bees, or the bees are dying out, but not right here. They're not, because all the swarm calls and the removal calls I get every spring, it's just, oh man, there are bees. There are plenty of bees out there. And it'll be in downtown of a city, or it can be out in the country. They're everywhere around here, I think. And so it must be a pretty good area for bees here, because they thrive pretty well.
That was going to be my other question about, like, with the mites and that. So there still is a reasonable amount of wild colonies sort of that have adapted and moved and made it happen.
I really think so. There's no way I think that we can know how many wild swarms or how many swarms that go into trees or so forth in the wild actually survive. I don't know how you can determine that, honestly, but there are people that swear like they've had bees in buildings for years and years and years. I'm sure that, maybe those bees die out more, move in, or they just continue to perpetuate their genetics. But there are some pretty rugged and tough bees around here. And, Africanized bees are notorious for mite prevention. They don't have issues with the mites. I don't think they really do a good job of not having issues. And so I don't think there are any true cases of Africanized bees in Alabama yet, but they've been all around us. And I'm sure there's been some mixture of the genetics out there from all the different races of bees. You've got, my bees look all different kinds of colors, all different ways. I don't say my bees, or any one particular type of bee, because we really don't know what they are. Especially if you catch a wild swarm out in the woods or at somebody's house, you have no idea where it came from. It could be just a combination of Italian, Carniolan, Caucasian, just everything could be in there. And so it's, I think that's one reason bees are so resilient, is because of just the way that they breed and the way that they pass the genetics around, mating with so many different drones. There's so much variation in the genetics that if one particular type of bee is more susceptible to a disease, the other type might not be. And so they can just continue to breed and become stronger and stronger genetically. And so it's just fascinating, I think, is the best word for it. Everything about them is.
I reckon the only thing, we're talking about the mating, the only thing that I reckon that maybe they slightly messed up on is when the queen that hatches out gets rid of most of the other queens in the hive before she goes on a mating flight. From my point of view, it'd be nice if she came back healthy and then got rid of them.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if that's the case, then if she gets gobbled up by a dragonfly, they're in trouble. you know.
Yeah, it's like,
So, but most, you know, even with the emergency situation, if they're eggs or young larvae, they can figure it out. My mentor told me one other thing that's been critical in my beekeeping career years ago. He said, well, what I did was I bought my first couple of hives back in 10 years ago in 2013. And for the first year or two, I was just, if I looked in the hive and I didn't see eggs, I panicked. So I said,
yep.
David, I need a new queen. And so he's like, just wait a couple of weeks, Bruce, just wait a couple of weeks. And if you don't have a queen, then you need to get a queen. And I'm like, no, I'm queenless. I need a queen. So I bought, he says, okay. So I go buy a queen from him. David, I need 3 queens or whatever. I kept buying queens from him. And then after a year or two of spending all that money, I decided to do what he said. And I've noticed, and maybe you have too, that if you go in a colony, it looks queenless, just give it a couple of weeks. You go back and almost all the time they've superseded the queen or there is a new queen in there. It's really, like, I would say 80 to 90% chance on that they're really not queenless. If they are, that's not for long. They've got that new queen coming along. So
down here, sometimes if we get into like the Darth situation where there isn't much forage, and they'll actually curtail what they're doing anyway. They was sort of, the queen's there running around and she's not laying, and you think, man. And I've had a little bit of a meltdown. I know that feeling. And then you see the queen as well, and then it's that next decision. Crikey, are you old and decrepit, or what's going on? But it's all the same deal. Come back another week or two and see what happens.
Absolutely.
But they know what they need most of the time, and I think that's the amazing part about it, is that they actually know, like you both said earlier, they know what they need, and they're going to go about doing it. And it's more about us facilitating what they need and facilitating what they're trying to achieve, rather than us kind of forcing them to go the way they need to go.
I mean, you recognize kind of all the things that bees do, the fundamentals of bees, but then every little fundamental, you can tweak it a little bit, and you can kind of do things to kind of adjust that. Like if you want them to brood up, you can feed them. You know, if you want them to, it's just so many different things you can do. And you can artificially stimulate them. You can artificially create queens. You can just kind of manipulate their basic biology to be able to help work towards your goals as well. And it's like it becomes a teamwork, or I guess a symbiosis between the humans and the bees. And that's kind of what every beekeeper's trying to get to, is to help provide the best opportunity for the bees to succeed while at the same time achieving your goals. So it's pretty wild. It's really cool. It's an opportunity to share in, nature. It's an opportunity to participate in that. It's really pretty neat.
I think that's the other thing with beekeeping. Once you actually fall in love with bees, you fall in love with the wider environment, because you start looking up and you go, oh, I wonder if that's got any nectar in that foraging plant. What is any wandering down the street? I took my little grandson for a walk around where my nan is, and I was looking at all the rosemary bushes going and counting the bees on the rosemary bushes and thinking, well, look at that there, that's pretty cool, and showing my little
it's so cool, man.
And there they are in the environment, and no one would even know that they're there. They're happily doing their thing.
Yep.
And so
it is. I did this, man. I never paid attention to the flowers. I think they were pretty, but I never paid attention to them, like what was blooming when or anything like that, until I had bees. And you'll see the different flowers blooming that are nectar producing flowers, and you're like walking out, are there bees on them? And you're looking for the bees, and it's extremely cool to you do become more in tune with your environment, for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. And watching them work the flowers, and it's pretty amazing how they can suck that nectar out and then turn it into that golden delicious stuff, isn't it?
Another miracle of bees is the wax production. I mean, how about that, where they just they produce wax scales out of their wax flakes or whatever you call them out of their bodies, and then they mold it to however they want it in a perfect hexagonal shape. And physics would tell you that's the perfect situation to maintain the most lightweight structure that can hold the most amount of honey and that kind of stuff. It's just all just absolutely amazing. The queen measures the cell size to determine if it's a drone or a worker. The workers build the cells depending on what the hive needs. I mean, it's just all just an amazing. It's really a miracle. It's not, that didn't just happen. I think there's a divine reason behind it. I think there's a divine creator. That had to be. The bees didn't just happen. And
I think the same thing. I can't believe that it could just be an accident. And the fact that when they make those honeycomb, and they make a wall in between too, like they make the dividing wall to give them the strength, so they've both got a back of the cell, and
it's all perfect. It's a
crazy.
Perfect design. It's a perfect design. And even humans have imitated that in a lot of structures that humans make. I mean, because it's one of the most strong structures, I think, structural designs that there is. And the bees do it all the time. They've done it for thousands of years. It's incredible.
And they make awesome candles when they finish with it.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. What I would like to do now is just maybe if you guys have any final thoughts. John, would you like to pitch in and tell us any final thoughts you may have?
We've had a bit of a break the last few months because of a few different things, but in that break, we've been filming some awesome episodes. So like the chimney episode that went up today, you can check out. But that leads to next week where we go and visit the guys that created the Fly Hive. And we've done a lot of traveling, and there's some awesome stuff with researching the bee venom that's coming up. And so like we really revitalized the show, and yeah, we're doing some really exciting things. And yeah, and it wouldn't be possible without the audience that has come along for the ride for the last 5 years. And yeah, especially our Patreons that have really helped us out the most.
Tell me this, as far as what the plans are ahead. You say the show, so you do have the basic beekeeping channel where you're doing the typical in the hive, the vlog, the journey type story, but you're also doing an intentional like show. So tell us a little bit more about that show. I know we talked briefly about it earlier, but tell us kind of what the purpose of that is and what you're doing with the show.
So up until now, it's kind of been in this kind of doco series of following Dad in his journey into learning and discovering beekeeping, and then really taking it to the professional level. Off the back of this, I now run a production company that I have a couple of people that work for me, and we have a number of other shows like the True Rhymes show that I do with Dad about the true meaning of nursery rhymes. Something I was finding that my workload was getting difficult, and I wasn't able to put the time into the bee show, and something that I didn't want to let that down and let that audience down. So restructuring the productions that we do is like making them into 10 episode blocks twice a year, and so that's also allowed us to really spend time and resources on like traveling and really refining what the story is that we're telling in each video that we're putting out. And that also allows us to, like Dad mentioned earlier, to explore the different other parts of beekeeping, like the research into bee venom and how that's actually got cancer healing properties and a bunch of other things like that. And getting to actually talk to people outside of ourselves and people like yourself, Bruce, and going and meeting other beekeepers and trying to discover what they're onto, and the other uses for beekeeping beyond just the honey production and the pollinating.
Well, Mark, why don't you bring it on home? Tell us if you have any final thoughts for us.
I guess my final thought is, I mean, obviously you've got an audience of beekeepers already, but don't be afraid to encourage the other people to get involved with beekeeping and fall in love with bees and nature and the planet. And what we're all basically here to do is try to have, I don't know, an experience of existence. And that's what beekeeping is. If you want an experience, I think beekeeping's been the biggest experience I've ever had. So, and it's been really good doing this with John, my son, as a father and son duo. I think that's been amazing because we've had some fair few long trips where, there's no radio reception and no phone reception either. So then you get, after at least an hour in the car, there's a lot of conversation that gets done. So that's been really good. Like we've had some talks about, I guess, what he thought I was thinking when he was growing up and what I thought I was doing were two different things. And I think that's been a really cool time we've spent together as an adult son and father together.
It's really helped me with my own daughter, and I've got another one on the way as well. So like understanding both sides by having that time with Dad, and also just understanding each other, because we're very different people. We've shared different, like a lot of tendencies are the same, but yeah, it's been nice to get to know each other on an adult level.
That's incredible. And, the community of beekeepers is amazing. It is over here. I think it probably is there too. Just the type of people that are involved with beekeeping, I think are for the most part good folks just that feel the way we do about the bees. And so you guys being able to do that together is an amazing experience as well. Just that's quality time, father and son. And just, man, I can't imagine that's such a great stuff.
Definitely cool.
Yeah.
So like making the show has been like awesome experience. It's helped my career, but it's my main takeaway is just getting to spend time with the old man. Rather than a normal colleague relationship, it's a little bit different because we can be a little bit more honest with each other without having to hurt like the concern that you normally have with colleagues. Sometimes it can go a little too far.
Oh, sure.
But like, it's been great. So I wouldn't trade it for anything.
my buddy Greg Burns with Nature's Image Farm, we have the stream team thing we do every Wednesday evening over here. We rotate between our channels, Castle Hives, Nature's Image Farm, and here at Bruce's Bees. And he says something, first of all, a question he asks people often is, what is about those bugs in a box? And then they'll answer. And then he also says something I think is real important. He says the bees are the conduit to the people. And when you think about it, really, without the bees, would you guys have this time together? Probably not. So that's a really neat saying that he says, and that is so true, because yes, it is bees. We love the bees, but really the relationships that we establish through beekeeping, to me, that's one of the biggest benefits of it. And my YouTube channel, I never knew I would do a YouTube channel. I'm still trying to figure out how to edit and do videos, but just, it's been fun to share. And really the community, the people I've met over the years through this thing, especially since I got involved with the Hive Life thing and our stream team thing, and just reaching out and kind of getting more courage, I guess you would say, or more confidence to be able to reach out to people like you, for example. I mean, I don't know if I ever would have done that, you know, at Icon here on my channel, but being willing to do that and able to talk to people like you all the way across the world, that never would have happened if I didn't get into beekeeping. And so it's just an incredible experience. And I really appreciate you guys coming on tonight. So I think we'll go ahead and close this out. I appreciate it. It's been very entertaining and interesting, and maybe someday in the future we can get together again and do it again. Man, it would be just a dream to come down there and visit you guys. I don't know if that'll be possible. Maybe someday. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds?
Thank you so much for having us, Bruce.
We'd always love to have you over here in the States as well to come and see what things are like.
That's been one of our goals, is to put together a trip to be able to go across America and visit some of the key key beekeepers that were kind of inspired us over the years.
But like we said earlier, beekeeping is basically the same everywhere as far as the basic fundamentals. It's just how each person does a little bit differently that makes a difference. Yeah. So I think we'll go ahead and close this out, guys. I appreciate you coming on, and y'all take care, be safe, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You too. Good on you, champ.